Michael, there are basically 6 broad areas that you can do to improve your cash flow. The first one is to increase your revenue. And let me just chunk down a couple of strategies there. 1, learn to increase your prices. Now that's a big one. You know, if I was to say to any business client right now, what should they be looking at is increasing their prices. Because the biggest challenge that most business owners have got is increasing their prices, because the challenge is not with their customers, it's with them. So you've at least got to increase your prices by the CPI rate every single year. So that's one that I'd be looking at.
But you don't want to lose your customer.
You don't want to lose your customer, but you do have to improve your prices. But a lot of that fear is created by the owner, not the customers. We actually had a client, it was remarkable. We asked him to increase his prices by 10%. He hadn't increased his prices in 4 years. He was horrified, Michael. He said, I'm going to lose all of my clients. I can't do it. I said, trust us. Just do it. He sent out a letter. He increased his prices by 2 increments, 5% each 6 months. He rang us up and he said, I didn't lose one client. His business went from cash flow negative to cash flow positive. It was extraordinary.
What price range were his products?
His price range of his products were, the average dollar sale was around $320 odd. And the greatest barrier he had was him. He was horrified. His staff were even worse, because they had to sell the cheapest. They had to be the cheapest. We've got to be the cheapest. We've got to be the cheapest. And they were selling a commodity. And I said, no, you've got to increase your prices and then leverage your marketing. The other area that I'd be looking at is, in trying to improve your cash flow, is you need to increase the speed at which you receive payments. Now, what do I mean by that? I really mean that you need to work on your accounts receivables. You need to make sure that you invoice on the day that you've completed the work. You need to make sure that you put the due date on every invoice. Not say, please pay us in 30 days, but on the physical date. You've got to make sure the date's really, really big. And you've got to make sure that you have an unreasonable person in your business who collects money. And sometimes that's not the owner, because the owner thinks, if I ring people up asking for money, they may not buy from me anymore. So really get somebody who's really good at being a tough bastard, okay? And employ them and do that work really, really well. The other area that I'd certainly look at is try to reduce the time that you pay expenses. So extend the payment cycle out. Now, when I was at Harvey Norman, one of the things that we were fantastic at doing was asking for extended credit. If you don't ask, you don't get. If you are going to pay people early, ask them for a settlement discounts. But it's quite amazing what you can do when you ring up your suppliers and say, we will take extra stock if you give us extra time to pay. So that's another strategy that I'd be looking at. The other one, spend less.
Well, that's easier said than done.
Yeah, it is. But in order to spend less, you've got to measure where your expenses are. We tend to put a lot of emphasis on, okay, let's measure sales. We spend an enormous amount of time on, let's set a budget for sales. Okay? What I'm suggesting that every organisation needs to do is they need to put an expenses budget and measure your expenses as a percentage of sales against this year versus last year as a percentage, and continue to drive those costs down. And in business, the biggest area of expenses is usually staff. And all I'm suggesting is measure your people not on their movement but on their achievements. And look at ways of reducing your costs on an ongoing basis by measuring it consistently.
What other sorts of areas do you find that businesses spend too much?
Assets that aren't working for them anymore. They're looking at machinery, cars, equipment that is tying up cash. Inventory is a huge one. And a lot of retailers don't have inventory budgets. They tend to think they have to buy a lot of stock to get the right price. And it's insane, because the larger your warehouse, the more inventory you will have. The principle is order light, order often, and work off inventory stock turns, and measure those stock turns on an ongoing basis and continue to drive them down.
And then you start looking at using other people's money.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it really comes down to one thing here. If you're in business, you've got to make a decision, and you've got to cross the line. You've got to stop looking at your business as an expense. You've got to look at it as an investment. You will not actually reap the returns if you're not willing to sow. And sometimes a business will not survive without money. Get over it. Now, if you're not willing to invest money into a business, work for someone else. It's not for you. All right? So there is heaps of money out there. If you have a wonderful business, go out there and get money. Now, there are two forms of money, debt or equity. Okay, you can actually factor your receivables, so you can get money in. You can actually put a line of credit. So all I'm suggesting is that the listeners understand that one of the biggest principles you need to get a handle of in all the businesses we've worked with, over 120 across the world, is one of the key challenges that most businesses have got is, how do I improve my cash flow? I'm making money, but what I've got to do is I've got to have enough cash every single month in order to support the growth. And if you are interested in growing your business, understand what your cash flow needs are before you grow the business. And really look at strategies that you can incorporate into your business immediately to give you immediate cash flow gains.
And if you're short of money, you shouldn't worry about getting an investor.
Absolutely not. Because you've actually got to look at it from an abundance perspective. If I get an investor, okay, and I give away 20% of my business, the pie's getting larger. Am I not getting a larger percentage because the pie is getting greater? This is what happens. We want to control everything. But a great business is never built from one person. It's usually a great team. And that team doesn't just mean employees. It can actually mean investors. And all I'm suggesting is that when you do get an investor, make sure you control the agenda, not them. Because their agenda might be very, very different from yours. So you must ensure that the investors you bring on understand what you're looking for and what they are willing to give you.